All right. It is, I'm just going to make this real quick, people. I have a point to prove here. Not that I have a point to prove, but I'm not the only one that's cluing in as to what's happening in the province of British Columbia, Canada, aka the New Congo. Only it's not so new anymore. It's been around for a while in terms of murder by fentanyl and medical kidnappings and illegal child apprehensions and just the whole 9 freaking yards, right? Okay, so what's the date today? It is April 19th of 2024. I didn't know that Stu Peters has his own channel. Apparently he does. So, with that said, okay, all right, you can see that, Stu Peters, all right? He's a little bit of a, outspoken individual that drops truth bombs, basically, all right? So anyway, I watched this video here, all right, and they brought up Surrey, quote unquote, British Columbia, Canada, with the Indians, aka Punjabis, Hindus, and so on and so on. There's a few other ones, but those are the two main dominant religions, because basically that's their religion. Punjabi is Sikhism, Hindu is Hindu, with their little Buddhas that they like, and their little elephants, okay? And then you have other parts of people from India that aren't the predominant majority of Indians migrating to Canada. Okay. En masse. So much so that people like me cannot move because there's no affordable housing. People like Tisha, my daughter, and Alex and their 2 kids who live in an apartment, locked in with the old rent, can't move because they can't afford the new rents because of the housing corruption in the province in general. Then we have Rhea sitting up in some basement suite in a broken down house with a band of Punjabi men up on top. You're talking a single woman with 3 little kids and a whole bunch of Punjabi men up on top, with the only house basically left on the block while all the other houses have been torn down. And it's a rickety house that she lives in, so you know it's a rickety basement. And she moved in, and as soon as she moved in, she had to take the landlord to court, Landlords and Tenancy Act branch, to get them to fix the things that they said that they were going to fix before she moved in. And then when she moved in, all of a sudden they weren't fixing jack shit. They said they couldn't because they had to get a license from the city, which was a bunch of crock. Anyway, and then there's my son downstairs with his wife that can't afford to move either because there's no affordable housing in the province of British Columbia, Canada. Well, this person here is talking about what's going on in Japan, how Japan is being overtaken by immigrants, or whatever, immigrants. And, of course, we know we've got the United States being infiltrated with, they like to call them migrants. Yeah, okay. That's why, Obama came in with his, well, we're going to create our own, I don't know what he wanted to create, but he's got the workforce for it now, as you've got Tyson Foods, I think it's called Tyson's. It's a major manufacturing food company in the United States that, would process hogs and beef and this and that, and shutting down plants because, they're trying to bring in their lab-grown meats and all this other crap. And what plants they do have, they're firing their current American workers en masse, we're talking tens of thousands at a time here, partnering up with the federal government in the United States of America to hire all these migrants at $15 an hour with a whole whack of freaking this, that, and everything else under the sun when it comes to education and housing and transportation and lunch at work and breakfast at work and blah, blah, blah. Well, all the Americans that have been working in these factories for years and years and years and years and years basically get kicked to the curb. Isn't that interesting? As they're, if they're not putting them there in those kind of positions of employment, they're moving them into cities, the migrants, that is, the immigrants, en masse, so many that people don't know what to do anymore in some of these cities, setting them up in hotels and this and that, and, kicking out the homeless people from shelters to house these migrants. And now the migrants, some of them are gathering together and storming city halls in New York and places like that, demanding more services. As if they're not getting enough. As the homeless people are sitting on the street wallowing away. The Americans, that is. Yeah. So, anyway, this guy here, he brought up the fact that in Yellowknife, it's all full of Africans now. Yellowknife is a small little town up in the interior.
Lake and Riley has become a rallying cry for millions of American citizens who are just tired of what you are proud of. Senator.
I'm pretty sure this was the video. Yeah, there he is. I'm not going to play the whole video because I want you to go look for it yourself and listen to it, because this guy mentioned Surrey. He mentioned Surrey, which is mostly Punjabis, with, Hindus and whatever, and Muslims, and
aliens
from
invading through China.
a lot of Syrians. You're talking tens of thousands of them, right? Arabs, right? The Muslims. Okay, United Emirates, Israel, places like that. Well, Israel is not a Muslim, but we have them here too as well, right? And he's talking about how in Richmond it's all being taken over by Chinese, and that's true. In Surrey, it's all taken over by brown people. That's true. Get up into the interior now, and it's nothing but a whole bunch of Africans from God knows where, I don't know, along with the brown people, the Punjabis, or whoever. The Chinese are moving in. This is up in the interior, right? In a small town full of First Nation people, natives, the actual Aboriginals, as they're, they're dying by fentanyl, people. So whatever okie dokie the UN is feeding the natives out here in Canada, it's just an old okie dokie through their accord that they brought in. They're trying to bring in well, I think they did already. I already talked about that Sendell framework and all that other crap, that they're trying to make it where the indigenous of wherever Canada, they have the rights to all the land, this, that, and everything. Yeah, okay, that's just a bunch of whole okie dokie. We already know they got their robotoids running the parliament buildings, because I've already proven to you that they exist, in terms of if they're hiring them on as a coroner to falsify death certificates so they can cover up murder and snuff movies and all this other shit. The RCMP, that is, and the government of British Columbia, Canada. Some of those politicians, if not most, have already been replaced with a copy. Whether it's a clone, a robotoid, a half-breed, who knows? But they're not normal. Okay, nothing that's going on in Canada right now, especially in British Columbia, Canada, because it's the hot spot, is not normal. All right? So, he pointed that out, that we're being invaded too. The only thing is, our government in Canada signed up with that UN immigration something program. I don't know the right. Already discussed it. Right? They signed up for it. So the government takes responsibility for everyone that comes here unless they're being sponsored. Okay? Like the Syrians next door. Same thing like in the United States. They get free this, free. They tap into all the local charities, the food banks, this, that, everything. They get their baby bonuses coming in with 5 kids. You're looking at well over $3,500 a month just from federal baby bonus, right? They get their welfare checks. They're told not to work for a year, at least. They get to go to school, and, as soon as they get here, they hook up with their kind from Syria that are already established here, right? Looking for more houses to bring more Syrians. So what I'm trying to say is my family has been targeted. It's been a long freaking time before I finally came across something that actually acknowledges what's going on in my province and how certain kinds of people are being targeted. And it's not the Syrians, it's not the Punjabis, it's not the freaking Hindus, it's not the bloody Muslims, unless of course they're the poorest of the poor and maybe black in terms of a Muslim. Everything else is white trash, half-breeds, and natives. Okay? I've been saying it for years. There's a reason why Uncle John was medically kidnapped, because he was just the tip of the iceberg. That's what's happening with the Caucasians out here as soon as they end up in the hospitals and they're at a certain age. And if they are social workers that come from here, there, and everywhere else that barely can speak freaking English want to take them out, lock them away like a dirty secret, so their houses can go up for sale for the big fish in the community, the property developers that like to create poverty en masse, putting people out onto the streets en masse, having families fall apart en masse. Because if that happens, then what happens? Bodies become available for illegal organ harvesting. They forgot to mention this about the illegal organ harvesting part. They didn't really touch base on the medical kidnapping of the elderly, namely the Caucasians who own the houses out here. And there's a lot of them, okay? And there's a lot of them locked up in temporary care wards being told that they can't go home because they're not able to look after themselves in their own homes. Interesting how they don't get in-home care service, though, eh? Hi, why? Because they're homeowners, people. And these immigrants that come to my country, through the assistance of the federal government, signed up with some UN agenda, well, they have to sell their home and pay for medical care until they're dead. Basically. They pay after they sell their house. After they sell their house, they have to pay for the amount of time that they stayed in a temporary care ward. Doesn't matter if it's 1 day or 6 months or a year. They will pay $32 a day, and that was in 2015. So it's probably $45 a day now in 2024. You multiply that by a year, 30 days out of the month. How much is coming off the sale of the house to pay public health care system its dues? And then they get moved into long-term care, and then they pay for that until there's nothing left. And then they get the IV turned off and they become a statistic. That's what happens. It's not the Punjabis that happening to. No. Because they live in the multi-family homes that are being specifically built for their kind, as well as Chinese and the Muslims. Not for the natives, not for the Caucasians, unless, of course, maybe they're an Eleanor Gilding. But what did Eleanor Gilding have to do in order to gain her wealth? She had to be a devil herself and sell out her brother and steal his money and ruin his family while she did it. She ruined 8 lives so that she could have wealth. Yeah. Well, there's not that many Caucasians left in British Columbia, Canada. They're becoming far and few in between, and the ones that are still around are huge targets. Unless, of course, you're someone like Eleanor Gilding and you do some really bad, dirty freaking deals, and the only thing that keeps you alive is the devil. But if you're a good person, you do good things, right? You have morals, you have respect for other people, you don't go off out of your way to commit crimes, you're just one big ass freaking target. He touches base on it because it's happening all over the place. He just forgot to mention that the people that are coming to this country participate in illegal organ harvesting, snuff movies, freaking murder by this and murder by that in terms of fentanyl and God knows what else they're lacing dope with, right? They bring in their slave mentality where you got to put 12 people in a 3-bedroom boo-boo house just so the landlord can get rich, walk around town acting like they're big and bad and better than everybody else as they're exploiting the poorest of the poor, even if it means their own kind. And because their own kind are so desperate to get out of their rotten freaking countries like India, they'll come here and they'll stack and pack themselves just to be able to get away from the corruption in their own country without realizing that they bring the corruption here to Canada with them. Doesn't matter if it's China. Doesn't matter if it's India. It doesn't matter if it's the United Emirates. United Emirates is famous for illegal organ harvesting. So is China. So is freaking India. What makes you think it just started and stopped over there? It didn't. It came over here now, people. But
San Vicente Camp, they're in Darien. All the records were burned. Why were they burned? I do not know. But the fact that we've been exposing Highest down there, and their office is, about, I would say, 60 yards away. I've been there many, many times. I spent months there, right? So I'm very familiar with the geometry, right?
Right, yeah.
It's probably 60 in Florida, and then they're going to deny. Well, so you see that fire in San Vicente Camp. I don't know why the records seem to
talking
have been
about
targeted.
the Darien
The rest of the
Gap
camp wasn't, right? But it could have been
and
to
the
cover
corruption
up for
that
anything.
goes
I
on
don't
there.
know. We're
As
grasping
one
for
big
straws here.
cover-up.
Well, I think that's a pretty logical conclusion.
As to
I mean,
who
this was a decade ago.
is coming into
2014,
the
Mayorkas and
country.
Joe Biden sat side by side, and literally, this is a quote, called for a, quote, unrelenting stream of third world migrants to pour over America's borders and make white people an absolute minority.
Yeah.
They said
And that's exactly what's happening in Canada. Only Canada caters to the ones that are educated and commit crimes. It was a Punjabi who illegally harvested Jemai's organs, working in the public healthcare system. You think he's the only one? Ha 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 ha! How do you think he lives in a freaking monster house? Him and his kind, just like him, one after another, after another, after another, after another, after another, and then throw in the freaking Chinese with their bullshit crap? Yeah, okay. And he says it's just a matter of time before it's a standoff between the Chinese and the freaking Indians, whether it's Hindu or Punjabi. And it will be. Sooner or later, ain't gonna come to it. They don't like each other. They do the same thing. That's why birds of a feather stick together. That's why all the Chinese are in Richmond and the Punjabis and Hindus are in Surrey and so on and so on. They don't necessarily intermingle, but they do the same shit. Just like we've got Punjabi doctors here in Surrey taking out organs illegally from dead bodies, covering up murder. We've got Chinese doctors doing that in Richmond. Oh, that's another person who can't find housing. My oldest son, because there is no affordable housing unless he wants to rent a bed with a house full of freaking people from a Chinese landlord or a Punjabi landlord that wants to stuff in 15 people into one freaking house and charge everybody $700 a month. So no wonder why my oldest son is homeless. When he had a place, I guess it's kind of like a rooming house or something, right? You know? Apparently the Punjabi men were sleeping together in the freaking living room on a mattress, for crying out loud, people. That's not right. I'm on lockdown. My son's on lockdown. My son that's basically homeless is on lockdown. Tisha's on lockdown. Ria's on lockdown. Why is it that all these people can't find affordable housing, but yet the government keeps bringing more and more and more immigrants, kicking out families like mine so they can move in the frickin' Syrians? Set them up for life. And teach them how to commit crime so they can pay their way to stay in Canada. Because that's what's going on.
He said it. Biden said it. I saw it. I watched it several times to make sure my eyes weren't lying. And so there was a riot in the camp. We had just been in there. We had gone in the camp and exposed a lot of things like normal, including your used to go through, then you'll have to show your passport. But the other 4,000 plus miles, just go right on in, right? So we went up from for instance, we saw some of the crossing areas down. It's just like the Mexican border. It's just the
talking
Canadian
about
side,
Canada.
Right? People are just flowing through back and forth. They go back and forth, actually. From Canada, it's both directions. From Toronto, we flew up to Northwest Territories to a place called Yellowknife.
Yeah, Yellowknife. Okay, that's not. I don't know if that's in Northwest Territories. I'm not exactly sure where it is on the map, but it's in Canada.
Yellowknife is 250 miles from the Arctic Circle. Why did we go to Yellowknife? I hadn't been there since, 30 years. But I went up to Yellowknife. It's a very small town. It's filled with Africans now. 250 miles from the Arctic Circle, right? It's filled with Africans and Chinese and Indians and whatnot.
Yeah, because they're taking over everything. So any housing that was available in Yellowknife, you can guarantee is gone. And because they're natives, they're being treated like trash. Yeah. The most at risk in Canada to be targeted, have their organs illegally harvested, lured to their deaths for snuff movies, murdered by fentanyl, evicted from their homes, lose their kids for this reason, that whatever, are Caucasians, black people, like black, right? And natives. That's it. So who's doing the targeting? Obviously, there's a few white people in there targeting because, you know, of that white supremacist attitude that makes them think that they're better than everybody else. But you got a whole lot of Punjabis thinking they're better than everybody else as well as the Chinese think they're better than everybody else as well as the Muslims think they're better than everybody else as well. But if you've got organized religion partnered up with organized crime and a corrupt government, well, you do the math.
And many of the First Nation people, the Native Canadians or whatever you want to call them, up there, they call themselves First Nation people. They have a huge alcohol problem. They're staggering around the streets. They've actually mostly closed the downtown mall there in Yellowknife. It's a very small, rough town. I mean, it's the kind of town, for instance, we're driving around and somebody's literally drying a bear skin on the corner of their house on one corner and a wolf on the other. I mean, seriously. So we went ice fishing and that sort of thing. But the bottom line is we were up there because we knew that many of that town in the Northwest Territories is basically being taken because the Russians and the Chinese are working to make that Northwest Passage, right, by the Arctic Circle with icebreakers and whatnot, which can actually supplant and replace much of the cargo.
And then he goes on to talk about in Chinatown, downtown and where I live, right, in Vancouver, in Chinatown, they already have Chinese policing stations where I guess they have the symbolism of 5 dragon paws or something related to a dragon times 5, which syndicates you're the enemy, right? Like this, the nonprofit will never be successful in British Columbia, Canada, people, because everybody's out to get what they can get. It doesn't matter what the ethnic culture is. Technically, no. And from the top all the way down to the bottom. Right? Like it's sick. It's like a real serious social sickness.
It's going through, for instance, the Panama Canal. So that passage is very important. In order to take that passage, they want to have their run of the mill. You know what's up there? Canada. Canada can't defend itself. Canada, by the way, has defended. Canada actually not defended. They have trained the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, the Chinese.
Yeah, they've been out here for years. 5,000 of them up in the interior. Maybe that's where they were, up in Yellowknife as well. No, they've been in British Columbia, Canada, up in the interior. Not to mention how they're working up in Kitimat, working on the LNG line, bringing in liquid gas, right, through a pipeline that is supposed to benefit the natives, but clearly you can hear that the natives aren't benefiting from it, unless, of course, they're a replaced native to make them look like they're a native, right, that are, you know, like that coroner, right, you know, the coroner is making money through the taxpayers being paid, but that thing wasn't even fucking boo-boo real. It had a motherboard in his head, hair, gaping holes for eyes, and something big and black in its cheek. I know, I haven't had a chance to follow up on that yet. I will. Because it's important for people to see what we're really dealing with here. And for anyone to convince themselves that these politicians are all 100% legit. No, people, they have been replaced. They weren't replaced by the natives. They weren't replaced by your average Caucasian who paid their taxes, went to work, retired, and thought that they wouldn't be medically kidnapped to only find out that they end up getting locked away like a dirty secret. And then one day some immigrant worker just comes in and shuts off the IV water and then they die. Okay? Seen it with Joan. I have no reason to lie. Okay? Uncle John mysteriously died 3 years, almost to the day that he went into the hospital. That was staged. Okay? So yeah, they probably did a Joan number 2 repeat. Shut off his IV as well after they got what they wanted. They stole his inheritance. that he got from Joan from a superannuation life insurance policy. And they're so crooked that they probably jimmied his own superannuation life insurance policy and erased some numbers, changed some dates, and made it so that Eleanor Gilding could get paid so she could pay out all the bribes that she promised for that to happen. Because that's how corrupt our government workers are and our government.
Army. They have trained them in Canada. Now that, a lot of people think that's conspiracy theory.
No, they've been doing it for years. They've been doing it for years, people. Why? As my daughter is being murdered and her murder is being covered up to only figure out that her organs were illegally harvested. And then to find out that your government, along with all the workers involved with that process, will go to hell and back to cover it up. Because they want to do it again and again and again and again and again.
I assure you, it is not. It is true. In fact, there's been photos published. I just spent most of a week with one of the Army officers who gave me a...
And my son is worried about petty gangs when Armageddon comes? Yeah, okay.
Details about it. Anyway, from Northwest Territories, which is clearly being taken, Yellowknife is the capital up there. It's the only little town up there. We then flew down to...
why are Africans up there? Punjabis, they like to go everywhere. They want to own Canada. Okay? I don't know how the UN's going to deal with the Punjabis, because if the UN comes in and tries to take the Punjabis' property away, it's going to be a big-ass freaking fight. Doesn't matter if you think the natives own everything. The Punjabis will say, get the heck out of it. But you see, the natives, they're dying off anyway, people. They're dying off just like the Caucasians are dying off. Hold on a minute. Freaking TELUS, man. I'm never going to get TELUS. You know why? They want me to sign something in I don't know, something to do with the freaking natives. Acknowledging this, acknowledging... No. That's what I mean. Natives going to come in, the UN and the federal government said that this is our property and we want to do this and we have power and, we own all of Canada. Punjabis will be like, hey, go get out of here. Same thing with the Chinese. You think the Chinese going to allow that to happen? Heck no. But the natives are dying off. Just like the white people, the old vulnerable white people are dying off sooner than later. Losing their houses, being put into long-term care, disappearing like dirty secrets, while the young ones are disappearing off the streets, dying by fentanyl. Yeah. And the poor blacks. Look, it's stupid.
Vancouver, again, we went to Chinatown in Vancouver. There is a Chinese police station in Vancouver that is marked. We went into it. We went into the Chinese police station. It actually says it right there. I put about 5 minutes walk from that Chinese police station in Chinatown. And by the way, looking at the dragons up, the Chinese dragons.
Yeah, listen to this.
If you're looking at these things, you need to know what you're looking at. If it has 5 claws, or 4 claws, or 3 claws, right? That means different things, right? If it has 3 claws, if a dragon has 3 claws, it means they're saying, you're our friend. In this territory, you're our friend. Here's our dragon saying you're our friend. If it has 4 claws, it's saying you're our relative, like our cousin or whatever, right? If it has 5 claws, it's saying we claim this land for ours, for China, right? Imperial China, right? All the dragons there have 5 claws. Now, this doesn't mean much to most people, but here in Okinawa, I'm near Tokyo right now, but over in Okinawa, Japan, the dragons they got there have 5 claws. And China is openly claiming that. Anyway, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I was just saying we have about 1 minute left here before we got to get to break.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm dominating this, but
no, I appreciate it. Yes.
And so, about 5 minutes walk from that Chinese police station in Chinatown, up in Vancouver, is a drug place where they're literally handing out cocaine. I mean, we went into it. They kicked us out. I was there with Masako Ganaha, the Japanese journalist, and they're literally giving drugs to Canadians. And you know, the Canadians who are all hunched over and trying to light the pipe and can't move and that sort of thing. Right?
Yeah, because nobody can get freaking housing. That's why. Mark Kane and his wife can't afford anything. Tisha and Alex makes $80,000 a year. Can't afford anything. Rhea can't afford anything. I can't afford anything. My son, my oldest son, Brooks, can't afford anything. That's just 5 independent households. Can't afford anything. Like I said before in my past videos, the government would only wish that we were all freaking drug addicts and strung out. Because then they can toss us out on the streets, leave us out on the streets, pimp us, use and abuse us, and then lure us off to our death and make sure that we have a miserable death that's being recorded as the RCMP are capitalizing off, and you know what? So they can bring in more immigrants. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Bring in their next generation of slum buildings. Yeah, okay.
Right outside the door, the Canadian government is literally pumping actual drugs. They're not just giving you the needle. They're really actually putting it in. You can't make up this stuff.
Yeah, and then they blame the victim. They did it to themselves when they die.